Welcome to The Chat. Come behind the inbound scenes of some of the world's fastest growing companies. For the past 10 years as Chatmetrics, we've had an exclusive inside view of how these industry leaders are revolutionising inbound marketing and sales across diverse sectors. Each week, we bring you conversations with top minds in marketing and sales who share insider secrets and strategies for driving inbound success. Join us on The Chat, your front row seat to the future of inbound. From helping truck drivers get healthy to building 8-figure revenue engines inside SaaS companies, today's guest has done it all. My guest today is Dusty Collins, VP of Sales at Visible Thread, a SaaS leader in the GovCon space. He's a proven builder, having led sales teams from scratch to smashing quota, scaled enterprise sales, and implemented repeatable systems across some of the most complex and compliance-driven industries. But Dusty isn't just a sales leader. He's also a dad of 3, a guy who uses AI to plan dinner and build discipline, and someone who's not afraid to talk openly about where AI overlaps. In this episode, we're diving into how he builds high-performing sales teams and how to use AI as a force multiplier without burning your market, and what happens when you stay relentlessly human in a tech-driven world. Dusty, welcome to The Chat.
Thanks for having me, Terry. Appreciate it.
Let's jump straight into it. Look, you've built some sales teams from zero to quota-crushing machines multiple times. What's the first 90 days of building a repeatable sales engine look like in your world?
So for me, first 90 days is a lot about getting up to speed and recognizing and understanding the market, what you're selling, who you're selling to, the personas, that type of thing. So for me, first 90 days is all about getting in, getting knowledge, understanding what you're selling, who you're selling to. And then, of course, you got to get to know the team as well. You got to know their strengths and weaknesses. You got to kind of understand what you're walking into, the personalities, the skills, the unique characteristics that each rep has, and then kind of build a plan and go forward. So for me, first 90 days is a lot about learning and trying to wrap your head around the people, what exists today, and then look at optimizing processes. You're going to pull data for that. You're going to do a lot of analyzing Salesforce reports. You're going to run a lot of Salesforce reports and try and draw some conclusions from that, see what's been successful in the past and understand where we're going wrong, when we're going wrong, when things go well, what does that look like? Just to be able to do some pattern recognition and then implement sort of the most successful fundamentals. And that's for me, that's huge, is the fundamentals. The really, really boring, repeatable, very James Clear Atomic Habits type stuff, but then just bringing that into the business context. Like, what are the really, really boring things that we can do over and over and over again and have them multiply for us?
Is there any time where you've discovered something in that first 90 days that has caused you to act quickly and with it, as opposed to keep continuing on through your analytic process and discovery process and then build something bigger beyond that? Have you seen things that you've just been off track that you've had to deal with straight away?
Yeah, I mean, plenty of times, yeah. There's often enough where you come in and you sort of wrap your head around the team that you have and try and make sure the personalities are going to be a fit for the type of leader that you are and the type of organization that they are, and if they're a fit for the sales role. I think especially nowadays too, you've had a lot of people who've sold through really good times, and then now the times aren't quite as simple and easy, and you need some people that are pretty hardcore and committed to being salespeople longer term. And so you need to make some assessments pretty quickly when you get in. And are these folks fit for purpose in the role that they're in? So you have to make some quick personnel decisions sometimes.
Okay.
And those are always open conversations. Of course, there's always data stuff that you have to look into and targeting and industry. And I think a few times in examples of mine where you come in and there's all these roles around who owns what accounts, or it's maybe really stratified based on verticals or things like that. And you're like, man, I think this is overcomplicating it. We need to simplify, and we could have books of business, we can have account ownership, but we need to make sure that everybody is comfortable going out and finding and just creating a culture where people are rewarded for being aggressive in finding new accounts and prospecting and trying to get things started again, so you can sort of light that prospecting fire.
Okay, so I think you might have shed a little bit of light on my next question I'm going to ask here then. So what is it that you're looking in people that would cause you to act in that first 90 days that says perhaps they're not the right for that job, not right for sales?
Yeah, certainly commitment, desire, energy, excitement, things that you can't necessarily put a measuring stick on, but that when you know it, you see it. But that's great when you have it, but when it's lacking, it really sticks out, right? So then those are the times we have to have a discussion and kind of really get in there. So then that doesn't lead to immediate decision. You seem like you've got a lot of scar tissue here with this company. You've been through a lot. I get it. Tell me about where things are at. What do you see as your future here within the company? Sometimes those are really good conversations to have up front because you can then potentially save that situation if it's a really bad situation. But sometimes if you're coming into a situation in transition, you'll find people have opinions about how things should be done or how they felt they've been done wrong by the company. And you just need to have the honest conversation of, do you want to be here? I mean, is this where you see yourself long term? Is this really what you want? It doesn't strike me that this is where you want to be and that you've got a long-term future here in your own mind. So why don't we just find a way to both move on and get ourselves both in better situations? You'll find that sometimes, and sometimes you can recover those and just having the conversation. They're like, oh, thank God. I'm glad you asked me because I was frustrated. Nobody ever listens to me here. Okay, cool. Let's dig in and try and wrap our head around why. And let's get this situation figured out. So like when things are really lacking, they really stick out.
It's fascinating to me that when people are unhappy, sometimes they're stuck. They're just really stuck. They can't prompt the conversation to start with, or their family's in a situation. I remember very, very early on in my career, I was a very new manager at the time. And in the steel industry, you have forklift operators, fork truck operators moving the steel around. This guy was damaging a lot of product, damaging the buildings. He was on a third and final warning. We brought him in and had to sit down and have the termination conversation with him. Now, look, I'm not a small bloke. I'm 6'1". This guy stood 4 inches over me and about a foot wider on each shoulder than I did. He was a monster of a guy, just to put some context on this. And we're sitting in the office and, had the conversation and said, look, unfortunately, your behaviour's not performing. We're going to have to let you go. And I watched this guy crumble. He was sort of big and expecting an argument. I watched this guy crumble and actually shed tears and thank me because he'd wanted to be a chef. And yet he felt like he was stuck in this role because he had to provide for his family. Now that he doesn't have this role anymore, he's going to go and become an apprentice chef. And I just went, my God, I didn't ask the right questions in the beginning. I didn't ask why he was doing the damage. I mean, that was the whole point. He didn't really want to be there. We could have helped him, and we did help him in the long run. We actually didn't terminate him. We helped him secure an apprenticeship before we let him go. It was a very interesting situation, but a good learning for me. Dusty, I think, you've got it nailed in terms of the right way to handle that for sure. You spoke about the James Cleary, habits, the simple things. What are those basic fundamental or activities or behaviours or habits that you need to build to be the foundation of a good GDM?
Yeah, for sure, you have to have a prospecting culture, and especially in 2025, I think that's, of course, it's something that nobody wants to do. Or I shouldn't say nobody, but it's a certain mold of person who is willing and capable of doing what it takes to be successful picking up the phone in 2025, because a lot of these other systems and people have been able to survive on email or LinkedIn or just kind of skirting the hard work, which I think is picking the phone up or going and knocking doors in person really is the hard work. But that human to human interaction still matters a lot. In the age of AI, it means even more, in my opinion, and you have to do it. So it's finding accounts, it's doing the prospecting, it's consistency, showing up and just trying to get a little bit better each day at what you're doing, whether it's practicing your talk tracks in the mirror to yourself or cold calling in a remote environment with a coworker, and you're just both on a Teams call and, one person's calling, one person's on mute listening, and you're just going back and forth. But just being disciplined and committed to the things that actually move the needle makes a huge difference. That's really, really difficult to find in people. And when you do find it, you really need to kind of cling to it and build a culture around it as much as you can. But it's a constant challenge, and it's something that you can lose pretty easily. Maybe one guy at the company goes and he's booking a lot more meetings than everybody else. And he's, I don't even do cold calling. And so now the narrative can become, cold calling's dead. Now we're emailing. Well, then Google and Microsoft changed their email deliverability, and you can't get more than 10% of your emails read. Well, what are you going to do? LinkedIn. Hey, I'm spamming people on LinkedIn. Nobody will respond. What are you going to do? Just pick up the phone, go see people, or have a human interaction. You need to be able to do those things. So to me, that's one of the core fundamentals. There's all sorts of stuff, meeting prep. prepping before you go into a meeting. Stupid, simple, easy to do. So many people don't do it. I don't have the time to do it. Man, you run a lot better meeting when you do. It's so hard. You get a much better result. You go in and you say, these are the 2 or 3 objectives I need to make sure that we cover. If you do that, you get out of that meeting, you're going to have a successful meeting. And if you have your fallbacks plan too, like there's just so many like really, really basic things like that I just don't think, they certainly don't sell and they don't get people excited. But if you can see those things, or if you can find those things in people, those are things that multiply over time and that you'll get a big return on. And I think they're super important and they're huge priorities for me. But those would be my examples that just pop to mind off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, the meeting prep one's really interesting, isn't it? I think not prepping properly for a meeting shows an enormous amount of disrespect for the person that you're in there for, because they're there for value as well. Your mind should be towards them, not towards, what you're going to get out of it. Yeah. Great. How do you approach building a GDM strategy for compliance heavy industries like GovCon, versus SaaS in general? There's a huge difference, I know, once you're dealing, with government organizations.
Yeah, you just really have to know the industry as well as you can so you don't come across looking like a fool. I think I underestimated what it was going to take making the transition from a logistics SaaS, which was it was a simple, not easy sale, but it was simple. You didn't have to explain a lot. You didn't have to know a lot of acronyms. You didn't have to know verbiage and specific processes that don't exist anywhere else in the SaaS space. There's so much in the government contracting, and you have to be credible. People have to feel like you actually understand what you're talking about, because what we see in our industry now, tons of new VC-backed companies are hiring, 23-year-old AEs that are coming straight out of college and trying to sling SaaS and think they can go in there. And then they step in to a conversation with a proposal manager, capture manager, BD manager, these people that have really specific jobs that you can't just say, oh, I'm going to make you 90% more efficient. Okay, I don't care about efficiency if I lose quality, because I can lose in a $3 billion bid on a lack of compliance. So now your efficiency gain that you gave me is completely worthless. And now I've damaged my reputation with the federal government, with a specific government agency. There's huge consequences to it. You as an AE go in and you think, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to sling some software. Man, you really can't do that. You really shouldn't do that. You got to know this industry, and you got to make sure that you and the prospect and make the most of your time and make the most of their time. Our people are the people that we sell into, extremely, extremely busy people, put under really, really tight deadlines that need someone to show up and not just be another idiot salesman trying to get them to buy their software. Yeah, that's what some of these industries can become when you just dump money at the problem.
What is the problem that you solve?
So we help find more business from the federal government using our SaaS, but it's also sort of managing pursuit, because these teams, they spend, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in staff costs to pursue these multi-billion-dollar bids. For them to even decide to go after a specific RFP, it might take them several months. They might have known about this RFP or the possibility that this RFP could happen for a year or 2 years in advance. They've got a team full of people over here trying to work with people inside the U.S. government as the need is being made more and more apparent, as they're clarifying what that need is, shaping what the RFP eventually will be, then meeting with, talking with, nurturing that opportunity. These are really, really long pursuits. So from that perspective, we're going to try and help them connect. Once those pursuits become a little bit more clear, how do I find those opportunities? Where should I bid on these things? How should I bid? What are we saying that the customer needs from us? Are we replying in a way that is compliant with all the contractual obligations, the legal obligations, the quality? Are we providing evidence that we've performed this type of work? So you can see that's just the tip of the iceberg of what we help with. But you can see how quickly that becomes really, really detailed work that involves a lot of different people, that the people that we sell to primarily now in BD proposals within the GovCon space, they have to sort of manage all of that. And they've got to project manage it. They've got to shepherd all these other people into getting their parts of the project done. And the result is they can win more. They can be compliant, which helps them win more in the future, because they don't do reputational damage, but also they don't get DQ'd on an opportunity that they've been working for 9 months because they missed one little piece. Hey, it needs to be in this font. I mean, that if that's as minimal a thing that can disqualify me, man, I better be 100% accurate. So we help with that. So that's probably like a little bit of a long-winded way to say it, but that would be just sort of a tip of the iceberg, what Visible Thread helps with. But it's another place, again, it's where AI can potentially go wrong, is 100% compliant, repeatable, and do I know how the AI even got the answers that it's giving me, and are they accurate? So good luck with that. I don't know. It's a black box right now.
It is. But you've spoken about playbooks and process a lot in your career history. What's a non-obvious sales process or tactic that's made a measurable difference?
That's a good question. I specialize in the obvious, I guess. I think that's my philosophy, is specialize in the obvious and just hammer those until we are as consistent and repeatable with that. The unique stuff I usually will find, so I've done this, I can't think of what it's called. There's a Strengths Finders thing. It's not Strengths Finders, but there's another test that you can do. I'm horrible with ideation and creation. That's not a strength of mine. But I do have people around me, and I've had people around me in the past, especially my SDR leaders that have worked with me, Christine Apolinas and Christopher Robin specifically come to mind as people that are insanely creative and really good at coming up with creative forms of outreach, or, maybe they're doing writing for executives at our company that put content out there and book meetings in that way. So there's some creative things that they've done, and they've really gone guerrilla mode at times to help me. But that part isn't my strength. I'm definitely just the more fundamental, white bread, right down the middle type of guy.
Going to make an observation. I think that in itself is a pretty unique approach these days, because I speak with so many people that are trying to look for that next bright, shiny object and find the new thing. And I think my philosophy is very, very based on the keep it simple process. And those fundamentals, human psychology hasn't changed much in the last 200 years. Hell, probably not much in the last 2,000 years, quite frankly. So,
Yes.
I think when you're talking about getting people to do stuff, to deliver outcomes and interacting with people, there's not too much new stuff that I've seen in the last, well, I could show my age here, but let's say throughout my career, that really is a very different approach to what I was doing in my very first sales role. There's nothing new. There's different names and there's different frameworks and there's different ways to throw it around, but it's all doing the same thing, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think this will give you an insight into my mind a little bit. One of my favorite things to do, and what I've done since I was a little kid, I was raised Christian, always have been a Christian. And the book of Proverbs in the Bible is one that has wisdom. And I feel like I do consume a lot of content around personal improvement, read all the books, I do all that stuff. I love it. But like, if you just read the book of Proverbs, it's all there already. We're just redoing the exact same things over and over again. And so I feel like that concept alone, that I'm reading an entire book that's based on, something that this tiny little verse in Proverbs said thousands of years ago, it's already there. Like, we have all the answers. They already exist. We just have to package them up in a way that helps our brains understand them. That's sort of like, it's through my career and the way I think about sales and fundamentals and what's good, whether it's health and fitness or sales. I feel like it's the same. Like, we know really, really old problems have really, really old solutions. Want to get healthier? Eat one ingredient foods. Yeah. That'll help you go a long way. So to me, that's like almost more of a life philosophy than anything.
Yeah, excellent. And I look, it proves the point. Not too much has changed in the last couple of thousand years. Excuse me. What do you think most companies get wrong when hiring or onboarding sales reps?
Certainly, there's the fallacy around logos, and that people that come from big logos can walk into a completely different company and do the same thing that they were doing at that previous company. You can see all the same numbers and sizes of business and industry, and they could be wildly different levels of success depending on the company. So I think there's a lot around logos and resume and what an employee looks like on paper relative to what the real output that you're going to get is. That's based on certainly logos and size of the business, but also just even from one startup to the other, like, they're complete. They have to match. My opinion is that the sales cycle has to be similar. And the level of technicality within the sales cycle has to be similar for you to be able to take what their successes at one place and translate it into success at another place.
And sales process, I'd imagine, if they're used to working with inbound leads, then there needs to be a
100%.
solid, demand gen play to have those inbound leads. You take someone that's worked at one of the big brands and pop them into a startup where all of a sudden they're going from being a farmer to being a hunter, and it's a completely different world.
Yeah, or being like the big name in the space, and they can make a cold call and say, "Hey, I work for Amazon. You ever heard of us?" And it's like, "Yeah, wait, I've been waiting for you to call." It's like, okay, that doesn't translate to a startup that's going against Amazon.
I've actually done that a couple of times. Hey, have you heard of Google? Yeah, well, I'm not from them. Can we have a chat anyway?
I like.
It's a bit of a laugh.
Yeah, there you go. It's a pattern interrupt.
So if that's the case, then how do you judge that? I mean, what somebody's got on paper and the brand that they've worked for, you see a certain amount of visibility in terms of what the sales process might look like in that other organization. But how do you really judge that through the recruitment process then?
It's hands-on. You got to have the conversations. You got to have a couple conversations with the people and dig deep and really make sure you get the answers that you need in those interviews. So I try to go as deep as I can and be as transparent as I can about our sale and what it's going to take and who you're going to need to talk to and how you're going to need to be able to organize yourself. But first, I'm going to ask them if they can articulate what they're doing. So I want to know their level of depth within the sales cycle. Are you really running this? Or you worked at this vendor here who you had somebody running all your demos. You had an SDR booking all your meetings. You had all this other support, and you're, quarterbacking the deal. That's a lot different than somebody that I need to go book your own stuff, run the process, do the demos, take the notes, do all the follow-up. So not saying that that's exactly the way that it is where I'm at now, but you got to match that as much as you possibly can. And you got to ask really in-depth questions and specific questions to get the answers that you want. Specific questions get specific answers. And so in my opinion, it takes more than one call to get there. And I personally need to have multiple calls with an account exec before I'm willing to hire them, because I need to make sure that I know that for myself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Is there any particular testing, psychometric or otherwise, that you've used in your career that you think's good? Or?
No, I haven't found anything that I think really does anything there, because and part of it is a belief that I think that anybody can do our job. I do think that I used to think before I knew anything about sales that extroverts are the best salespeople. And then, I've met many introverts who are the best salespeople I've ever met. And so I just don't think that there's a specific MBTI or any type of personality quiz that gets you there. I know there are some companies that heavily rely on that and say you'll be successful if you are this persona. I don't know. I've seen too many outliers, and all the best people that I've ever met have been outliers that are, they got their own quirks to them. So I don't know. I can't fit people in a box that closely. I haven't found a formula that works.
There is one that I've used over the years that I've found to be successful. I found it in a book called Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman. And in the insurance industry in the US, they had a horrific turnover of door-to-door salespeople, horrific turnover, and it was a huge cost to the organization. And so they tried to work out what was the problem. Why was there such a staff turnover? And fundamentally, it came down to you needed, in that hard, cold sales environment where you're going to get a lot of rejection, you needed to have a level of resilience to be able to accept rejection. And they've built a very, very detailed, it's not that detailed, I think there's 40 or 50 questions, which gives you scores in a whole host of different aspects around. And it's not just optimism, it's how big you catastrophize, whether you blame things externally or whether you take responsibility yourself, all of these things. And what it does, it gives you a hope score. And they found that people with the higher hope score actually make better salespeople, because salespeople are going to get rejection. And it's the ones that can handle and manage that rejection. So I've seen that work quite successfully in teams where there's been some churn and there's been a lower level of success, that using this to try and help them select people with a higher hope score is actually, particularly where it's been I was about to say a harder sales environment. Is there a harder sales environment? All sales is hard, I guess, unless you're Apple or Google.
Yeah, exactly. I think there is harder and easier but usually you're compensated relatively to how hard or easy
Yeah,
the sales cycle is.
that's right. That's right. So, how do you align sales and marketing when the stakes are high and the cycles are long? You've spoken about cycles potentially that could be years in what you've described earlier, particularly with bigger government jobs in terms of that very early stages preparation and helping to shape the RFP. Is there any rituals or frameworks that really work?
Not that I'm aware of. I work really closely with my VP of marketing, and he does a fantastic job for us. I'd say it's certainly the best relationship I've had with anybody in marketing in my career. And he's just, I think we are both pragmatic leaders who care about getting the job done. And so the fact that we mesh from that perspective, we can get whatever done that we need to. And he's willing to support me in any way possible, and I try and support him in any way possible. So process-wise, I don't really have anything, but I think personality-wise, it's a really big difference to have somebody that I just implicitly trust on that side of the house.
Mhm. And communicate with, by the sound of it. You've got to have that relationship and be involved.
Yeah, I mean, we're communicating multiple times a week, if not daily. So we're working together really, really closely, and that just makes all the difference in the world.
Is there particular formal set times of get together where you'll go through and review things together, or is there an involvement in the sales meetings or you in the marketing meetings, for instance? Is there anything along those lines that you do formally, or it just works?
Yeah, we have leadership calls for sure that we're both involved in. We've got one-to-one catch-ups that we have every week. And then in the meantime, in between time, we're always kind of working together. Hey, we got this webinar coming up. We need a speaker, or we need this to happen. Can you help coordinate with the person that owns that account? Can you do? Yes, of course. So it's project specific, but we do have regular recurring one-on-ones that we hold every single week religiously, and just make sure that it never gets missed. And if we do miss, we're finding a way to catch up and make it happen.
So across the organisations that you've worked with, I get a sense that there's been a variation of marketing led and sales led. I won't say product led, but marketing led and inbound, lead generation or demand generation, and then more of a focus on that outbound from sales. How important do you think a combination of both of those are, or is it case by case?
I think it depends on the business that you're in and the stage of the business that you're in. Obviously, early on, you've got to be pretty outbound focused. You got to go preach the gospel of whatever it is that you're selling. You got to find some awareness, get some awareness. And then as you progress through the business and you have more of a reputation and you have more of a marketing engine that's built up and humming, and because that can take some time to get that going, it matters more later. Depending on industry, reputation, business, where you're at within the business, it varies quite a bit. At Dispatch, we started out with just sales, knocking doors daily. We were out in the field, and, we were stopping 100 places a day, pulling up to business parks and Eden Prairie, Minnesota, or, Minneapolis suburbs. And me and Ryan McIntosh just knocking doors, handing out pamphlets, trying to raise awareness and win some business. And that's what we did for that time. And then as the business got bigger and bigger, very, very few people were even doing that at all. We were working our existing business. That business was growing like crazy. We were raising rounds of funding. The marketing machine got up and running and got going better and better and better. And so then we could do more farming. Then we had a lot more inbound. And then, of course, we're always growing outbound, but those became much, much larger and more important sources of business within our business, was finding new locations, upselling, and handling the inbounds from the really big customers. At least that was our focus.
How much of a mix is there at the moment with where you are inbound to outbound?
I would say we're not quite 50-50. We still do more outbound than we do inbound. We're a bootstrap company too, so we're kind of playing a different game than a lot of people. Our AEs do a fantastic job of prospecting and making the dials, and we're working really hard to keep that as a part of our culture and continue to expand and grow that as a part of our culture. We do have some really big names in our space that work with us, that we love and that worked with us for a long time. And so we still do. We've got a great customer success team that's working on expanding those, and marketing's continuing to get the word out there. But it's a smaller space, or it's a space that it's more niche, than logistics and delivery. That's obviously just a monster. GovCon's not a small industry, but some of the GovCon SaaS, it's a little bit of a smaller pie than logistics, but it's still growing. It's growing, and it's growing pretty quickly. So there's a lot of work to be done there. But yeah, I'd say we're still a little bit more outbound focused than inbound. but we get decent inbound too. And we run great events. Like we just had a webinar today. It went really well. It was really well received. We had a lot of people attending it. So our marketing does a good job of pulling inbound leads for us, but
Yeah.
you can't compare to such a huge industry like logistics.
There's a big difference, isn't there, between when you're trying to create awareness and you're outbound very targeted with individual organizations versus, a Google keyword search that has 300,000 searches in your region every day, which is,
Yeah, exactly.
it's
And
a completely different.
I think the industry that we're in now too, being a little bit more niche, but also being like super compliance focused, like we talked about, a more precise message is more important than blasting the market with a generic message. And so that's like, we're fighting through how do we make sure that we do a really good job of showing people that we know them and we know their problems and their issues versus, we've had a ton of VC money poured into the space. So we've had a bunch of competitors that have spawned in the last 2 years that are saying, hey, we're here, we're software for AI, we're AI software for GovCon, we're here. And it's like, man, they just got here and they're just spamming a huge market or a smaller market. But I think what they don't understand about it is they don't understand that they're compromising sort of their reputation among those people because they're not trying to really get to know it. They're just finding a couple buzzwords within ChatGPT and putting some blasting email sequences,
I'm still really worried about any business that says, hey, we're AI and we're here. At this point in time, I've still not seen too many that have the robust governance in place to make sure that their offering is actually secure and will deliver what it promises to deliver. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Look, we're bootstrapped as well. So there's a big difference between being in a funded business and a bootstrap business, isn't there? What are the main differences you see?
Well, you certainly don't just throw money at problems. If you got something going sideways, you can't just hire more people. You can't just say, we'll pump up the Google ads for a couple weeks here and see if that, throw some money at that, see if that's better. So, and just strategic, like you really, really need to understand, justify, and look at your spend and where it's going. And are you getting the right ROI on all your spend? Do we need to do this event or is this event actually going to be better? Like you really just have to make like it's your own, personal spending money. Like, do I want this new mountain bike or do I need something else? Does the family need something else? That's like just a comparative type of thing when I think about it with my family. So, okay, maybe I need to just like focus on what's going to move the needle here. It works for me. I've always been a very pragmatic person. And so in some ways, the VC spending, I never could understand it. There was one point in time where at one of the companies I was at, we raised a bunch of money and we decided to use that money to go fund one department. And I was like, man, all the money's coming from this department and we're spending money on that. I don't know. Maybe we should spend it over here and maybe we don't need to spend what we're going to. Maybe I could use 10% of those resources over here and we would actually be much better off. That's always been my mindset and the way I've thought of things. But it's a totally different environment. And so the bootstrapped environment suits me. I wouldn't mind having more resources, but at the same time, you got to operate in the environment that you're in. And so that's kind of what I do. And I like it. I think I can identify with our founder and with the leadership team, the decisions that we make because they are common sense, pragmatic people that care about just getting the job done. I think it helps focus the whole company on being more pragmatic when you're a bootstrapped company too.
I think it's I enjoy it too. It's very different. My career, I've been in huge brands, with almost endless buckets of cash, but I enjoy it. I've always been pragmatic. And I think one of the skills that makes you, if you are able to, live to the philosophy, there's always another way to skin a cat. You don't need to throw dollars at everything. There's always another way to, whether it's dip your toe in the water or find, partners, etc. There's always another way than throwing cash. Look, there's no doubt that cash helps, but there's a whole host of other things that come along with that as well when you've got investors. So, yeah.
No question about it.
We'll move on quickly a little bit here, changing topics. We've sort of touched on AI a couple of times here. You mentioned you use AI every day, and I love the conversation we've had so far about it. Can you walk us through your personal framework for knowing when AI is helping versus when it's harming your outcomes?
So a lot of times nowadays, and especially in the last 2 years, I started using ChatGPT when it came out in 2022 in November, and I basically used it for a couple of days and I thought, I don't, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't really get it. It can come up with a bunch of written text, but it's not very smart stuff. And I can Google search whatever. Over time, that has completely changed, of course, as the product has gotten better. I've found more and more use cases for it. And I've also found there are times when it really doesn't make sense to do it. A lot of times, if I need something accurate or reliable, I really can't use ChatGPT. So I had mentioned to you before that I use it for cooking a lot, and I do use it for cooking. I didn't use it for baking. I think that's a good example. Like baking is so much more scientific. So if I wanted to make a dessert or a pastry or something like that, you have to be so precise with those ingredients or you can botch the whole thing. But if I'm just coming up with recipe ideas or if I'm just grilling or cooking something, very basic, very simple, very easy stuff, you can kind of play with it a little bit. But anytime you need precision, AI is not going to be the answer for you. It is going to be maybe a starting point for you, but you just cannot rely on it. You couldn't rely on putting your personal finances. I wouldn't do it. Put your personal finances in there and try and have it give you an analysis and say you should do this, that, and the other thing. Like kind of absolving yourself of personal responsibility. You're compromising your own personal data. I know a lot of people that are doing stuff like that with AI. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. I think if you wouldn't be comfortable putting something in a system that is going to get hacked and that something could get leaked and people would see your personal information on, man, you really shouldn't trust anybody in AI, any software in AI to help you do that. So you still got to be pretty particular and pretty security focused, even in your personal dealings with AI, for sure.
Look, I love that analogy. You'd use it to get a recipe, but not for I haven't counted in the last week. I've been noticing in the last week that my inbox is getting filled with, I'll call it spam AI messages. I mean, look, I think if we weren't in this environment of AIs around and everybody's aware of it, the messages that are coming in, they're trying, but they're also trying, if that makes sense. It's like I'm watching these messages come in and they're drawing on stuff that's ridiculous and, the mistakes with even simple things like names or names of organizations, mistakes that are being made around that. I look at it and go, you know what? Somebody's paid $5,000 a month for this AI SDR. And I can tell you now, I'll never deal with that company because of the mistakes that I saw in there. I just have zero trust. If they're prepared to let something go out like that into the marketplace with those errors in it, then they've burnt me. I mean, sure, maybe they're not doing it to their entire market, but are they? Yeah, that's the question along the way. I mean, you mentioned it's a good starting point. I think that's a great way to look at it too. It's a great starting point for a few ideas. But I love your framework that you throw across the top of it in terms of, or your lens in terms of, hey, stop and think about it. Does this really make sense? Is this a good idea? So, yeah, I think that's excellent. In your work at Visible Thread, how do you draw the line between AI doing the heavy lifting and humans making the judgment calls on that?
Yeah, I think the judgment call those are the perfect words. It's like I can get an opinion from AI on certain things. I'm going to write an email in response to an email. Am I answering their question? Is it clear? Is the ask that I have at the end of this email going to be their takeaway message, or is there another takeaway message here? How can I reduce the number of words that I put into it? So having it be an editor and give me the feedback on how something's being perceived, I think that's a huge area where it can really help communication, is to organize your thoughts. Sometimes what I'll do is there's a situation that I'll encounter and I will get on the phone on my app. I will press the microphone button and I will just brain dump into the microphone. It does a fantastic job of transcription. ChatGPT is unbelievable at transcription. But I'll just say, I need you to help me organize my thoughts here. Because that's really where I get into, sometimes I have a hard time just sort of getting all my thoughts out and then having it. I need to understand what my thoughts are. And if I don't have somebody I can talk to about that specific issue, which sometimes as a VP at a company, I really can't talk to other people about it. And I need to be able to have the conversation or understand how I should approach a situation. It's great for that. It can organize my thoughts. It can say, this is what you're thinking. This is, what I assume you're trying to get out of this, or this is what this person needs to hear, or this is a good way to communicate this. And then I can refine from there. I want to deliver this message. I want to deliver it in a thoughtful way. I want them to feel heard and understood. I want to also communicate clearly that this is what needs to be done. Help me repackage this. I think I use it a lot there, responding to emails, making sure there's clarity in messaging, that the point is getting across, that I'm not overly verbose in my response. That's a big thing for me. Communication and how communication is perceived and received. On the other side, in sales, of course, is one of the most important things, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Your comment about helping you gather your thoughts and refine, have you find a time where you've used it to gather your thoughts and it's come back and said, this is what I'm assuming or thinking that you're trying to get, the message you're getting, or this is the problem you're thinking about, this is the message you're getting across, and it's just been off track and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just hasn't been, yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of times, and then you have to refine it and add additional context. I found the context, you have to give it as much possible context as you can. So again, if it's sensitive stuff, then you wouldn't want someone querying your chat. Like I just envision future legal cases where they're like, here's this guy and here's all the chats he had at ChatGPT, and like, look at this guy. This guy is mentally fit. Are you sure about that? So I try not to put anything in there that makes me seem too crazy. But also, like, there's plenty of times where I'm like, I just need to contextualize this. And there's a lot of times where it will misread something, or it will take, let's say we're doing like a competitive bake-off and I want to clearly communicate and articulate our differentiators. It will often just sort of like blend the context that I feed into it and not understand it. Part of that is a me problem. I'm not giving it the context in a way that it can understand clearly. I need to edit that. I need to modify how I'm giving it that feedback. But it's not 50-50, but it's not 90-10 or 80-20 that it gets it right. It's probably 60-40, 70-30.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that whole aspect about reviewing your chat transcript. I remember when I was promoted first from a sales role to a management role, and my manager at the time took me aside and was giving me some sage advice. And mind you, I'd taken a big backward step in my career. I'm a qualified accountant. I was a state accountant running, a big book of business for this company. I mean, we were doing everything running. Effectively, it was what you'd call a commercial manager these days. It was a $30 million business. We're running profit and loss and balance sheet. We're putting money on the short-term money market, investing. It was a very, very commercial job. And so as you can imagine, there's a level of, ethics, and to be part of the Australian Institute of Accountants, et cetera, there's a level of ethics that, you have to be able to jump through to hold a role like that. And I remember him taking me aside one day and said, Terry, moving into a management role now, it's important that, you think about the actions and decisions and, things that you say. And, my advice to you is make sure that anything you do or say, think about if you would be happy with that on the front page of the local newspaper tomorrow.
Yeah.
And, at the time I was thinking, okay, I kind of get that. I feel pretty comfortable with the decisions I make from that level. But it's something that stuck with me, and it really had surfaced in particular. I'm always mindful of it when it comes to anything on the internet. You put something out there. I'm not a huge fan on social media. You put it out there, it's out there forever. But even more so when, you start talking about these large language models that are learning on everything that we put in there. Sure, they've got a policy that you've got a paid version. They don't use your information for learning. Yeah, really? Do I believe that? Come
The
on.
terms and service
come down in the
change.
last hour. Yeah, that's right. That's right. 3 words change and then all of a sudden they've got access to everything. But that example you gave, where you can imagine standing up in court and here's the entire, last 3 years chat transcript. I wonder how many people out there listening to this will go, I wonder would I want my chat transcript to be published in the front page of the paper tomorrow morning? Yeah.
Yeah. And I like to think
Crazy,
that I'm pretty
crazy.
conservative with it. And I've said some things or asked some questions that I'm like, man, I'm asking for a good reason, but if you just saw the question that I asked alone, you wouldn't think that I was you would question me a little bit, or you just, I don't know, especially like
exactly.
some parenting questions, or you just want an answer to something that you saw in a movie or something like that. Like, man, this guy asks a lot of questions about Vlad the Impaler. What is wrong? We need to do like a psychological report on this guy. What's going on here?
And it's really interesting. About 4 or 5 weeks ago now, I've got a custom GPT that I use, and I've put, it was always, oh, you're so great, Terry. Yep, that's a great idea. It was very confirming rather than challenging. And I've never liked that through my career. And I actually went to the stages of building in a prompt into it that said, look, don't stop doing this. You need to be a safety check I want you to challenge me. I want you to question me. And that if I'm asking and talking about a concept, we really need to, you need to be black hat here and dig down into why it won't work. You have to get me to convince you. Man, I hate it. I've gone from loving this thing to hating this thing, but it is 10 times better. It's making me think so much deeper than I've ever thought before. And it has really changed. It's changed a lot of my thought process and how I do get to outcomes and make decisions, quite frankly, just by building that prompt into it to say, we've got to dig deeper. I've got to convince you, you're on the opposite side. Instead of being supportive and confirming, you need to challenge me. I need to convince you that it's right. And it really has made me think at a much deeper level. So I hate it, but I love it. I've got a love-hate relationship with it at the moment. I've
I
considered
agree.
changing it a couple of times, but I'm not going to.
I've seen the same thing, and I actually think this new model GPT-5 has been even more in ChatGPT is even more confirming. And I've got prompts in there, and where I notice it sometimes too is I'll be, I'm using it for my health and fitness, and be using this is my list of supplements. These are my goals. These are my macros. Hit me with it. What is missing? What about this is good? What about it is bad? And then later I'll go in and I'll say, hey, you know what my current supplements are? What would I want? Let's think from first principles. What would I really want to do? And then the list of things that it sends me is all the things that I'm already doing and maybe one or two other things. And then I have to question it and say, okay, but no, seriously, first principles, go full black hat mode. I want the best of the best of the best. And then it will give me something completely different. And I'm just like, okay, so was that all BS, what you just fed me with the first answer if I didn't question you? And that's when I have the prompt in there that says, just give me objective truth. Okay, sure.
It was the moment for me probably, I'd say a year ago now, maybe a little bit longer, where I'd done the same thing and challenged it. Is this really the best approach? Is this really the best outcome? And I just kept asking, do better, do better, do better. And the outcome where we finished after 30 minutes compared to where it started was completely different. And for me, that was the time where I thought, okay, I was starting to get in, if you draw a scale on the AI hype scale where one is you're the hype believer, at the other end you're a skeptic, I was starting to move. I'm always been in the mid-range. I was starting to move up towards the, believing the hype of this thing. It just seemed amazing. But that point just flipped me straight back to the middle again. Look, I'm not a skeptic. I'm not a hype. I think I'm pretty realistic in the middle. It's a good tool, but it's just like anything else. It's, garbage in, garbage out. And, you need to be mindful and use your own brain. And what, my biggest fear with AI, quite frankly, is that people stop using their own brains and just believe everything that comes out of it and start using everything that comes out of it. And like I said, I see so much of that even in my inbox much more recently. It's been that way probably for the last 12 or 18 months or so. But there seems in the last, I'd say a couple of weeks, but maybe a month, it's just there's AI rubbish coming from almost everywhere. It's ridiculous.
Well, and I think another thing just to add on to that too is I don't know if what it gave me in the end was actually better. And I don't know if the first response that it gave me was better. So now where am I? I don't know, was it better? Which one was better? Which one was optimal? I don't know. So you kind of end up in the same spot that you began where you're like, I don't think that's right. And then you get to the end and you're like, well, if that's right, is that right? I don't know. I could probably change his mind again.
That's trust, isn't it? That's just trust, and that's what happens when you vary your approach and vary your messaging. It's trust. And that, goes beyond LLMs. It goes for all of us.
Yeah.
Exactly. What are some of the biggest risks that you've seen when teams over-index on AI for sales and marketing?
Yeah, well, certainly the over-reliance on it that you mentioned can be an issue. And I saw it recently, actually, from a competitor that was distributing some materials about us. And, they were comparing the us versus Visible Thread. And these are the different, and which, frankly, great use case. They're doing it well to an extent. But where it fell off is that this customer shared it with us. And it was like, everything that it said was a deterrent. They were our strengths. And I was like, okay, well, we can verify all these things that they just said were our weaknesses and their strengths, that they're actually our strengths and their weaknesses, but they didn't add it and say, oh, wow, oh crap. We're sending them basically the Visible Thread talking points that they can evidence. And so if I present this to somebody, and I'm basically giving red meat to my competitor by doing that. So that for sure, the AI writes terrible emails. It's always written terrible emails. It hasn't gotten much better. You can do styles, you can do prompting, you can try and get it to do it a certain way. You'll get it slightly better. At the end of the day, it's really not doing that much for you. I don't think it's going to get any better. I don't know how it could get so good that it's really that useful, but people aren't checking it. It's giving you things that, like, you can do competitive analysis. But again, the inaccuracy, it really all comes down to the inaccuracy. Where is it getting this information? If I'm asking for a market assessment on government SaaS or RFP solutions, I want a feature list. Give me a feature list. Give me approximate pricing, all that stuff. I can get an answer for it. It's complete BS, but I can get an answer for it and I can send it out. So I think there's a lot of just sort of that blind trust and faith, or inexperienced people that don't know the answers to the questions and they're asking questions and getting answers and assuming that it's correct. There's all sorts of issues where you can run into it. We have customers, and so generation is a big piece of the job of the people that we sell into, writing content to respond to government RFPs. And it might put in some things in those RFPs that are inaccurate. And there's a world, and I don't know that it has happened with AI, but there is a world where you can say that you have a capability that you don't have. You can win an RFP, you can win a giant contract, and then you are on the hook to deliver those services at whatever cost. And cost overruns on a project are a real thing. And you can ruin your reputation, or you can be on the hook for delivering that service, and then you've got to contract it out, and now you're just going way, way, way over on your costs for that project. So there are just so many ways in which it can go wrong without a human in the loop, and you still have to have that. I'm not sure. Maybe there will be a day where it's 100% accurate, repeatable, and you can discover where it's even pulling the information from. But today that doesn't exist.
Look, I think you're right. Where does it get the information from, particularly when you're doing market research on competitors or even clients? You've got to remember there's a whole wall. There's a wall where you've got public information, then you've got private information. And sure, everything you've got on your website, that's visible. Everybody knows about that. 95% of the stuff you want your prospects to know about is generally on your website. There'll only be 5% or something that's not, that's hidden, that draws them into that meeting to have that conversation. The reality is, when you're using AI, where do you think it's getting that information from? It can only access public information. If there's been no deep research study done on, the specific features and pricing of your particular offering, or it's not available publicly, then it will guess. It's always going to guess. And that's where I think you need to use your own to actually make a decision. Say, okay, I'm not even going to ask that question because I know it's not going to give me an accurate answer.
Yeah. And it'll even cite sources that have nothing to do. So in ChatGPT right now, you can have it search the web and it will bring you a piece of evidence and cite a source. And then you click on that source and it has nothing to do with the answer that it gave you. Or it's completely misinterpreting what that is saying and presenting that as a fact to you. But if you don't go in and do the investigation, and that's not just like sometimes, that's almost every time in ChatGPT. If you go and you ask for the sourcing of 5 different things, more than half of them, I would guess, are going to be incorrect. Sources have nothing to do with what it presented in that paragraph. So even with the citing of sources, they're moving in that direction, but it's still wrong.
And you would think that with the amount of time they've been at it, and one of the biggest risks or failings of AI is this whole hallucination process and citing, fake or irrelevant sources. You would think that by now they would put the guardrails in place to actually have eliminated that. But I think it just shows how far away we are from truthful AI and truthful large learning models. I just think we're a long, long way away from it. The fact that it even hallucinates in the first place, what is that? Why? The thing that fascinates me is, why would it even do it? There's some fundamental built into this thing that it has such a desire to please and to be seen as credible that it has to give you or make up an answer rather than say, sorry, I don't know that. I would have trusted much more if it just said, I can't access that information. It might be frustrating, but these big businesses, they do everything they can to try and hook you in and keep you in there. So it's like, they don't want it to say, no, I can't give you the answer. So you go away and try and find it somewhere else. I want you to stay in there using that. Anyway, I think we're just a long way away from being able to trust it to any real extent. You need to make sure you're very sharp, keeping a very sharp eye on what's going on with it. Is there a time in your experience where AI has created a compliance or sales challenge in your world that you've had to handle?
Not really, because we've been as thoughtful as we can about implementing AI, where we do it and where we don't. And that really comes from my CEO. He's got a technical background. He understands how all this stuff works, and he's been very educational with us for the pitfalls of AI. I wouldn't know about the differences really. I mean, I'm sure by now I would have gotten there, but I got there pretty early on the differences between deterministic software and generative AI, and how much of a black box generative AI and how generative AI comes up with its answers and how it was trained and all that stuff. So my CEO Fergal has done a lot when it comes to educating us and other people in our field on how to use it. So we really don't try to push the boundaries when we need factual information. We don't really use it as much. And we try and limit what we put into those systems. Of course, from a work perspective, we're super careful about that. And it really becomes a lot of like written content and me like jamming on ideas that's more personal stuff, or like figuring out situations. But from a data perspective, we don't use it that often. I'll write email campaigns and stuff like that as a way to get some ideas, but we limit it as much as we can. But to your point, and not to talk our book too much, but our software, we made the decision within our software. So we have a feature that, you can use source documents and then you can say, hey, I need some written content based on this past performance document or these past performance documents. And if you're looking for something that doesn't exist within those documents, it will say, I didn't find anything within those documents. And it is frustrating. But guess what? You didn't just create content on something that you can't do. And so you won't have to try and execute or be on the hook for that service. So I think that's like a way in which, because of the place that I work, I'm a little bit more conscious of what AI can't do and the limitations and where we shouldn't use it and where we should use it, because that's just been beaten into our heads. And I say that with the most affection for things getting beaten into my head. I'm a big beater of things into my head. It's certainly thick enough that it requires a beating from time to time. So
very good, very good. He sounds like a great guy, actually. I'd like to meet him at some point in time.
Yeah.
So changing things up just a little bit. And look, I've got to say, I am on the skeptic to hype. I'm in the middle, but I am a lover of AI and I'm more optimistic about the future of it. And I use it all the time in all different places. But like you, just have a high level of awareness. So this isn't, certainly not an AI bash session. I think there's some places where it is absolutely amazing. And I want to get on to something a little bit more personal for you now. You've led teams and scaled functions and moved from startup to enterprise and now in a bootstrap environment. What's been the most humbling leadership lesson that you've learned along the way?
I think you can get to a point where you have some success in a role at a company or in several roles at a company, and you think, I've got it figured out. I'm the reason that these are successful. And sometimes that's the case, but usually there's a whole heck of a lot more that contributes to your success in those roles and at that company. And there's a whole heck of a lot of that. And then you go to something different and you just get smacked in the face by reality that things are different. It's almost like the same thing that I said about AEs going from one company to another. And then it's completely different. And you're just like, whoa, what is this? I've never had these problems before. I'm not this guy. I'm the guy that does this, 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 and this. And we just crush and everything's great all the time and perfect. And I can run teams and I can have no leadership problems and my people love me and blah, blah, blah. And then you get into situations where that's not the case. And you thought you were sort of the master of your domain. And then you're like, oh my gosh, okay. There's a new game on the field. I got to play the new game and I got to learn and understand. So I think with leadership, you never have a problem. At least I've never had a problem being humble because I'm constantly being humbled. Depending on what day of the week it is, I'm either on a mountaintop or I'm in a valley low. That's just life. Certainly life in sales, but certainly life in sales leadership too. So in every possible way, I've been humbled, but with people issues, with performance issues, with hiring decisions, you can kind of think like, oh, I've got it figured out and I've got a system that works. And then all of a sudden you apply the system somewhere else and it's like, just goes to crap. And you're like, okay, time for a new system. Just we got to figure out what works differently here. And that's like where I came up with the 90-day strategy is like learning what works in specific businesses and not coming into it with like, sure, you want to have a plan and you want to have like an agenda and sort of some rough ideas about your philosophy, but you also then have to find what works at that particular place and optimize what that is, bring your own flavor to it. But the dynamics are so different. So never had a problem being humble because I'm just constantly getting smacked in the face by humility, I think. Situations all the
It's
ways.
interesting. It makes me think of a phrase, it takes a village. I've worked in some organisations over the years where there's been either departments or individuals that have thought that success was all on their shoulders. It was all because of them. The sales department leading revenue, there would be no business if it wasn't for us. The marketing department driving the brand awareness, there'd be no business if it wasn't for us. And I've been acutely aware, and my first experience with that was actually at a very young age. I've been acutely aware of the fact that it takes a village. If there's one aspect of an organisation that's underperforming or not delivering on its area of responsibility, then it's likely that the entire business will fail. And what might have been working very well because everything's humming along and there's a great culture in place in one, get a slightly different change to that environment somewhere else, and all of a sudden, customer success isn't as up to speed, or there's not as good a connection between production and customer success. And so there's new features being dropped, and all of a sudden the sales can't understand why churn's increased. There's so many different aspects that come, involve the successful outcome of delivering a service and delivering value to a customer. It's every touch point, from the very first touch point that they see, whether it's outbound from sales or a billboard from marketing, right through until when they're paying their bills every month and how they interact with the accounts department. People don't understand the importance and the impact it has on that relationship with the customer. So I think, again, we talk about that environment of an account executive moving from one to another, managers moving from one to other. The biggest aspect that I see in that is that it takes a village, and there's no two villages that are alike, I guess, is the message that I've seen. Every organisation's got its own little intricacies and nuances, that's for sure.
Yeah, people are unique and the people challenges are different everywhere you go because you got different people to deal with.
Different people, different management styles, different cultures, and it drives all of those things, different personalities, even across the customer base or the market. You've also talked about keeping things human, like date nights and routine. How does discipline in your personal life help shape your leadership style?
Yeah, I think I can be pretty regimented in my personal life and rigid in my personal life just because I need that security and stability outside of work, where work can be crazy and then you've got to just sort of have that. But one of the best date nights every Wednesday, my wife and I do date night. It was something that we didn't do for a long time. We got involved in a Bible study here a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And we had done date night for a little while when we were a young couple with no kids, and it was really easy to do. And we loved it and it was great. And then we got out of the habit of doing it and life got busy, and then we had kids and things got crazy. And it's just kind of like, man, do we know each other anymore? We're doing the chore. We're doing all this other stuff. And we got in this Bible study, and the person who recommended it's like, well, we have a babysitters club at the church and you can just hire them for 4 hours instead of 2. And then you can have a date night with your wife every Wednesday before you go to Bible study. It's like, that is a genius idea. And we've done it every Wednesday that we can since. Babysitter staffing issues notwithstanding, sometimes that happens, but it's completely transformative to our marriage and super important. And that routine I find to be it helps me keep my sanity, and it helps me just sort of like, we've got something to look forward to, my wife and I, every week. When things are tough, we can kind of, Wednesday's coming. We're going to be there soon, so you've got a little bit of extra something to look forward to when you're in those deeper moments of stress. So I think that would be one example. And then exercise and fitness are two other major pillars in the personal life that every single week we're getting 3 workouts in, no matter what, without fail. And that's stress management as well. And that's just trying to keep enough energy to deal with these 3 kids. It's 3 under 5 right now. So we're in like kind of the difficult point. It's a great phase of life, but that consistency.
Chaos mode, I call it.
Yeah, it is. It certainly is. So it keeps you sane and it keeps you able to perform during the work week and sort of be able to handle and be more resilient. So the routine and consistency there, I need it. I love it. It's also, part of the only social life I have is doing those things, working out in a group class or with a personal trainer, and then date night with the wife. Like, what's more important than that? But that level of, so then you can shift from, okay, well, that seems pretty regimented. That seems pretty, you're just doing the same thing at the same times every single week. And that's where I use AI to help me be more creative and add a little bit of fun stuff here and there. What would be good things to do? Or maybe we're at the dinner table, we're out to eat with the wife and I, and it's, what's a fun little activity for my wife and I to do? What are some questions we could ask each other just to kind of have a little bit of fun? And we can use AI to do that and come up with 15 questions that we have to answer. We just bounce them back and forth. We have fun. We just find ways to make it fun. And we use AI in that way to make life a little bit more fun and human. And I like using AI. It works in serious situations, but I like using it for like the little small things and the little joys of life, like coming up with new coffee recipes or cooking and getting dinner ideas or the date night thing. Like, it's just, those are fun ways that I can humanize and bring it into my life and have a little bit more joy with it. That's how it adds to my life, I guess.
But look, you talk about routine and discipline, but I get a sense that there's a rhythm. I think you're talking about a rhythm to your life as well. What's your weekly rhythm as a VP of sales, and how do you structure your time to stay ahead without burning out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you're just kind of in a constant phase of burning. You catch a few wins here and there. You get a little extra win in the sales. You catch a couple bad weeks, and you're like, man, I don't know. But I do have a pretty rigorous routine schedule, where I load up like meeting days. So in the same way that I'm pretty rigorous with my out of work schedule, of course, my calendar at work is just absolutely stacked every week. But I've got regular recurring meetings every single in my AEs every single week. We don't miss it. It's the most important thing that we do every week is have those calls. We've got revenue calls on Monday. So we're talking through pipeline. We're trying to understand where things are at. And then I've just got a load of one-on-ones back to back. And then on Tuesday morning, I'm getting my one-on-ones again. And then I've got my AE team meeting where we get together as a group. Sometimes we bring the SDRs in on that. And we talk about what's going to happen. What do we need to do? Strategic type meetings. Wednesday mornings, leadership call, right? So that's me and the C-suite and my peer VPs. We're talking through, larger business structure Wednesdays. And then I get a lot of time. So the latter part of my week is fewer meetings, but it is more like get things done time and project work time. And so I get a lot of energy at the beginning of the week. I wouldn't say that I'm extroverted. I wouldn't say that I'm introverted. I'm kind of in the middle, but I do need to deload midway through the week. I need to sort of like peel back on the people interaction. So I get a little bit more project work done. And certainly in the afternoons, I try and get the project work done and sales ops stuff and all that stuff that I can just kind of zone in, do my thing. So I kind of start heavy on the front side with people meetings and leadership meetings, and then taper off on the back end of the week with fewer meetings, more project work, more this needs to get done. And then we're right back into it on Monday, getting sort of like the organizational, strategic and other meetings.
How much of a split is there in your business between remote and in office? Are you remote entirely or in the office? What's the situation?
Yes, I'm remote almost all the time. We'll do like quarterly team get-togethers, and sometimes a little bit more than quarterly with the AE team, with the sales team, but also with my CEO, COO, and other senior leadership members. So we'll get together at least quarterly, and we'll usually pair those together around the same trips where we go somewhere and meet in person to the group together.
How did you make the transition from in-office to remote? And what changes has that made in terms of, I'm listening to in terms of the meetings and the one-on-ones you're having? I mean, they're obviously very scheduled and it's all via Zoom or Teams.
Yeah.
How did you make that transition from in-office to remote?
So that happened in 2020 with COVID when I was at
like
Dispatch.
It did for everybody, mostly.
Like it did for everybody. And then it just never went back for me. But during that time, then I got really a lot more regimented and organized. Prior to that, I wasn't as good at managing my time in my in-office time, but I also could do things. It was easier to do things quicker, so I was in the office by 7 and leaving the office most days at like 6-ish. And I could get everything that I need to get in. And there were definitely a lot more interactions with people, but less organized interactions with people. And so now I'm just a lot more tight with the meetings, tight with the prep. And then if we do that, that structure allows me to be casual if there's another meeting that needs to happen later in the week. But it's just all about it's been all about time management and
Yeah.
prep.
It's interesting. My first, I'll call it remote role. I've managed geographically dispersed businesses for a long time. My first role doing that was actually 1997. This shows my age. And so in terms of managing remote teams, I've hardly ever through my corporate career been in the same office as where my team was. And this whole 2020 when it came, and then this business here with Chatmetrics, we've been 100% remote since 2015. We've never had an office. The whole team's been remote. It was just felt like home for me. It was very natural. Yeah, we had some problems because it's very different. I mean, the steel industry in the distribution side of the business, so it's like all the sales and front end into the market, steel on trucks, and then they've got warehouses and distribution. So it was like I was running geographically dispersed teams, but I was the remote one more than they were remote, so to speak.
Mhm.
In this business, dealing with remote individuals, we had a few stumbles in the beginning. There's a whole lot of challenges when people, work from home and work in remote environments. I've always worked on the premise that I don't care where you are. You can be dangling your toes in the lake as long as you're doing the job. That's the main thing. And because for us, running a 24-hour shift pattern, they have to turn up for their shift. They've got to do their 8 hours. And then, you can be off before and after, but you've got to be available through that entire time. And one of the things we did to solve that issue was we now do have an office, but it's a virtual office. Everyone just signs into a Zoom room. They can be wherever. It doesn't matter where they are or what they look like. We do chat, so it's all via the keyboard. For our team, there's no face-to-face meetings at all. And so that's for the operations team anyway, the chat operations team. And so for those guys, they just sign in and out of a Zoom meeting. And I found that the big benefit for that was very quickly the whole culture of the business changed. They were much more collegiate, much more team environment than, feeling more separated and isolated. It's been, interesting. We had some challenges in the beginning. Is there something in particular that you do in terms of making sure or that you're aware of the level of productivity and commitment from your team being remote?
Yeah, I think in sales, it's easy because it's so metrics driven and there's so many different proof points that people are doing the work that they say that they're doing. And the performative parts of the job are objective. You're closing business or you're not closing business. You're going to the meetings that are booked for you or you're not doing that. And we use Gong, which is a meeting recordings software. Love it. It's great. But if you don't show up for the meeting, I can tell. If you're not making your calls, they're not logging in Salesforce. Emails aren't logging in Salesforce. I can tell you're not doing your job. So I think it's a bit of a luxury that I have. Other people probably have to manage a little bit more tightly, but that is important. And I'm a hound for metrics. I don't live and die by them, but I know them all and I'm tracking everything that I can just so I have as much context as possible.
Yeah. What's the structure? Do you have, I think you mentioned before, it's not so much of a split of SDRs and AEs. Do you have any that focus more on the meeting setting side of things versus the closing side of things?
Yeah, we have 3 SDRs. Currently, we have 7 account executives, 1 who's sort of a player coach right now. We've got a good chunk of AEs, we've got a little bit fewer SDRs, and their primary focus really is just booking meetings as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got a customer success team that's a decently sizable one. Off the top of my head, maybe 6 there. We've got a pretty robust customer-facing team.
Are your AIs, do they manage both inbound and outbound?
Yep. Do anything. And they'll also do work with existing customers as well. So the customer success team primarily owns the existing customers. We don't love you in Legal. We do, if you sell the account, you're going to keep the account and work the account moving forward if they need additional services and products. And they're on trainings. The account execs are on trainings. They're helping later stage. We're trying to connect with other people. The organizations that we sell into are really, really huge too. So we could sell into an organization and then sell into that same organization. And those 2 groups of people they don't even know who each other is, or they know who each other is, but they don't even know they're both using our software.
Yeah. Land and expand gives you an opportunity it gives you credibility to mention the same organization in a different department. Yeah. Sometimes depends, I guess, how much divide there is and silo mentality there is in the business, whether you want to mention that or not.
Yeah. And you hope, your A's know what the situation is. But there's a lot of international companies too. So you might have somebody in the Middle East and the US and in EMEA.
Yeah. Dusty, you mentioned there's one of your team that's standing out. What do you look for in the next generation of sales leaders? And what does make someone stand out to you right now?
You mentioned it before with that personality test, and I don't remember the exact verbiage that you used, but I use agency as sort of like the I'm in control of my own destiny. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, bringing me what, if there's a challenge, bringing me the challenge with a proposed solution and saying, this is what I think I'm going to do. What do you think about that? Is that a good path forward? There are many employees or people that have worked for me in the past. Your whole one-on-one is just solving their problems for them. And you're like, if you come and you say, hey, I've got this issue, this is my thought. Here's a clear explanation of what's happening. Here's the context. Here's what I think I should do. What do you think of that? And I can just say, good, or now let's modify this part or tweak this or that. If that really helps you stand out. I think doing that and then just trying to understand people's motivations and where they strive, strengths and weaknesses. Are you good with people? Do you really just want to make as much money as possible? Well, I'm going to push you down the IC track probably then. So all these come into play, but also sort of behaviors around them managing themselves and helping me manage them, managing up, I guess, an agency. I'm in charge of my destiny. I'm the one who's going to make or break myself, not market factors or competition or anything like that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I'm very aligned with my thoughts on that as well, for sure. I've got another quick 4 questions to ask you before we finish up. What's a book you've read in the last 12 months?
Oh, man. You know what I've been doing? I haven't read any good nonfiction content in a while. Let's see. I've got my Audible up here. You know what I've been reading a lot of, though, is Jack Reacher books. So I love Jack Reacher nonfiction or fiction books. Always have. As a kid, I used to listen to a lot of fiction. And so I've been doing that. But yeah, I've got a few I've downloaded, but nothing that that's sticking out to me.
Jack Reacher is good. It's one of those things that, it's a release. It gets you away from reality and absorb yourself in a story. I love that.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the business one you wanted to mention?
The business one I was reading is Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. And I found it to be decent. I don't love it. It's decent. It's about, and that's a bit of a countercultural type book around your best self and your best productivity may not come from just charging super hard into things. So that one's been interesting. I'm about halfway through that one now. I like it, but it's not blowing me away. I'm not in love with it, but not in the last 12 months, but one of the books that I really loved was the Robert Greene book called Mastery. And that one was really good. And he goes through the different phases of mastery that what people that he would deem as masters of their craft went through. And in every phase of it, this is a certain phase of mastery, call it apprenticeship. And this is what Beethoven was doing at this age. And this was his path. And he tells stories about each of these different masters that are really good. So I really love the whole group Robert Greene books. It's got the 48 Laws of Power and then I think 48 Laws of Human Nature or something like that. Those are all really good. And they follow the same format. Very, very fun books to read.
I haven't read the Mastery one. I'll have to get it out. It sounds great.
Yeah, it's super good.
What's the worst sales advice you hear out in the wild?
That's a great question. I think it's anybody that gives sales advice that is prescriptive or that is do this and this is what works. Anybody who's being overly dogmatic in their sales advice. Yeah, so many people and so many different types of sales influencers now think that they know sales. If anyone ever says, and this is maybe more of a pet peeve of mine, but if you're on X, Twitter, or LinkedIn and people are talking about quote unquote high ticket sales, that's one of the ones that's a trigger. High ticket is a trigger word for me because it just means they're selling like really expensive consumer products to people, and using pressure tactics to try. And I think it's one of those things that just gives people in sales a terrible name. It's a high ticket sales, high ticket this, high ticket that. This is the thing that's going to change the game for you. All that stuff immediately shoots up every red flag that I have. As you know, my whole philosophy is like the antithesis of that. So that stuff really bothers me, but I try not to consume it as much as I can.
What's the one tool you can't live without in your sales stack?
Probably Gong. I love Gong. It's so good. You can listen to the calls. You can get transcriptions. You can replay and learn. And as a sales leader, it's great because you can get visibility into what's being talked about, how you're presenting things, the positioning, what people are saying about you, what they're saying about your competition. Like there's just so many insights that you can get from that. And then obviously a CRM, you got to have a CRM. But I'd say if it's not like a really basic thing, it's got to be Gong.
Yeah. If you were in the office, if it was a full on in the office, would Gong still be just as important? do you think?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think so. Because you're never going to be able to get on all your team's calls regardless. And so if you're in Gong, you can literally get through every call. You can put it on 1.5x speed. So it just gives you so much more ability to understand what people are saying and how each individual rep is doing. There's such a deep level of capability in that software too that I just love.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And if you weren't in sales, what would you be doing?
That's a great question. I was a health coach before I was in sales, and I did some personal training, and I love working with fitness and the body and nutrition and the science. My degree is in health sciences, so I think I'd probably be doing something like that. My favorite job that I've ever had, though, is I was a zipline tour guide. So I was taking people on zipline tours in Dubuque, Iowa at Sky Tours, and
Wow.
it was just the most fun job ever. It was so fun. So, and you got to stay super active. You were outside in the summer, so got a good sweat on every day, had a great tan. People were always there to have a great time. You never encountered a group of people that were there that were bummed out. You can't be bummed out and ziplining at the same time.
You're not going to be bummed out, but there'll be certainly a wide range of emotions from fear to adulation, I'm sure.
For sure. And I love taking people through that. I love seeing people go through the whole range of emotion.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Dusty, I've got to say, it's been an outstanding conversation today. I appreciate your time. I know it's sort of on the surface. When I was putting these questions together, I thought, I hope this doesn't come across like a bit of a grilling, but I've really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you have, and I appreciate your time.
No, the feeling's mutual, Terry. I appreciate it. I appreciate you thinking of me and inviting me on.
Thanks for joining us on the chat.